Make a life for myself. 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 Life for myself. Make a 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 life for myself.
Test, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls from all over the world. My name is Rags to Riches. Hope everything's good in your world, as good as it can be. We're going to listen to we're going to listen to the FOMC meeting today with Chairman Powell, Jerome Powell. And pretty much everybody's talking at this point that it's going to be a pause. It is a pause. They met. So they're going to kind of debrief us and see what's happening. So this article was from Motley Fool. And let me check here. This article is from Motley Fool back in May. Okay, history says the S&P 500 is headed towards a new bull market. The federal funds rate has peaked 11 times since 1970, meaning there have been 11 rate hike cycles during that period. The S&P 500 index produced an average return of 14.8% during the year immediately following those cycles, with gains in 8 of the 11 one-year periods, according to data from Charles Schwab. In other words, if the FOMC is done raising the federal funds rate for the time being, history says the S&P 500 will climb nearly 15% in the next 12 months. That figure is significant for two reasons. First, the S&P 500 is currently 14% off its high, so a 15% gain would carry the index to new all-time highs. Secondly, the S&P 500 is currently in a bear market, but a 15% gain would carry the index into bull market territory. What do you guys think here in chat? What do you think? Readers may be wondering why the stock market would rise following a rate hike cycle. Higher rates suppress economic growth by disincentivizing borrowing. So it stands to reason that the stock market should fall with each successive rate hike? The answer to that question delves into human psychology. Uncertainty makes people uncomfortable. The market is often described as forward-looking because investors make decisions based on their expectations about the future. But uncertainty complicates the decision-making process. So when the Fed eliminates some of that uncertainty by signaling a pause in the rate hike cycle, investors tend to respond bullishly. In other words, once a rate hike cycle reaches its end, investors are already anticipating the first rate cut, which will stimulate economic growth. There's another side to this too, guys. Sometimes these pauses in eventual rate hikes, maybe in the 12-month to 24-month range, you're going to be up, but immediately following those, a lot of times the stock market takes a nosedive. So we got to be careful. All right, I am going to get my screen ready here. We'll share this up with everybody. Check and see. Okay, cool. There we go. Cool. And make sure we're good to go here. FOMC meeting. So they will be live here, I'd imagine, pretty soon. So we will monitor this, and as soon as they go live, we will too. Okay, cool. So let's check chat here. Red Squirrel, what's up? Sam Kemp, let's hear it. Rags, Nate, what up, Rags? MJ Money, what's the verdict, Rags? We gonna make it? Man, nobody's gonna make it. You know that. You hanging around here. You know you're not gonna make it around here. Davis, I'm buying. Nate, don't worry, I already forgot to like and subscribe. HOA, oink oink. Katie, let's go. Mego, sun is shining. All right. Finn Bear, handsome Dan. I clicked the like 2 times just for the feeling. Off Peak Media. There he is. Father Time, guys. Here we go. Let's see what he's got here.
Good afternoon. My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. We understand the hardship that high inflation is causing, and we remain strongly committed to bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal. Price stability is the responsibility of the Federal Reserve. Without price stability, the economy doesn't work for anyone. In particular, without price stability, we will not achieve a sustained period of strong labor market conditions that benefit all. Since early last year, the FOMC has significantly tightened the stance of monetary policy. We have raised our policy interest rate by 5 percentage points, and we've continued to reduce our securities holdings at a brisk pace. We've covered a lot of ground, and the full effects of our tightening have yet to be felt. In light of how far we've come in tightening policy, the uncertain lags with which monetary policy affects the economy, and potential headwinds from credit tightening, today we decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged and to continue to reduce our securities holdings. Looking ahead, nearly all committee participants view it as likely that some further rate increases will be appropriate this year to bring inflation down to 2% over time. And I will have more to say about monetary policy after briefly reviewing economic developments. The U.S. economy slowed significantly last year, and recent indicators suggest that economic activity has continued to expand at a modest pace. Although growth in consumer spending has picked up this year, activity in the housing sector remains weak, largely reflecting higher mortgage rates. Higher interest rates and slower output growth also appear to be weighing on business fixed investment. Committee participants generally expect subdued growth to continue. In our summary of economic projections, the median projection has real GDP growth at 1.0% this year and 1.1% next year, well below the median estimate of the longer run normal growth rate. The labor market remains very tight. Over the past 3 months, payroll job gains averaged a robust 283,000 jobs per month. The unemployment rate moved up but remained low in May at 3.7%. There are some signs that supply and demand in the labor market are coming into better balance. The labor force participation rate has moved up in recent months, particularly for individuals aged 25 to 54 years. Nominal wage growth has shown signs of easing, and job vacancies have declined so far this year. While the jobs to workers gap has declined, labor demand still substantially exceeds the supply of available workers. FOMC participants expect supply and demand conditions in the labor market to come into better balance over time, easing upward pressures on inflation. The median unemployment rate projection in the SEP rises to 4.1% at the end of this year and 4.5% at the end of next year. Inflation remains well above our longer-run 2% goal. Over the 12 months ending in April, total PCE prices rose 4.4%, excluding the volatile food and energy categories. Core PCE prices rose 4.7%. In May, the 12-month change in the Consumer Price Index came in at 4%, and the change in the core CPI was 5.3%. Inflation has moderated somewhat since the middle of last year. Nonetheless, inflation pressures continue to run high, and the process of getting inflation back down to 2% has a long way to go. The median projection in the SEP for total PCE inflation is 3.2% this year, 2.5% next year, and 2.1% in 2025. Core PCE inflation, which excludes volatile and food and energy prices, is projected to run higher than total inflation, and the median projection has been revised in the SEP up to 3.9% this year. Despite elevated inflation, longer-term inflation expectations appear to remain well anchored, as reflected in a broad range of surveys of households, businesses, and forecasters, as well as measures from financial markets. The Fed's monetary policy actions are guided by our mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. My colleagues and I are acutely aware that high inflation imposes hardship as it erodes purchasing power, especially for those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation. We are highly attentive to the risks that high inflation poses to both sides of our mandate, and we are strongly committed to returning inflation to our 2% objective. As I noted earlier, since early last year, we have raised our policy rate by 5 percentage points. We have been seeing the effects of our policy tightening on demand in the most interest rate sensitive sectors of the economy, especially housing and investment. It will take time, however, for the full effects of monetary restraint to be realized, especially on inflation. The economy is facing headwinds from tighter credit conditions for households and businesses, which are likely to weigh on economic activity, hiring, and inflation. The extent of these effects remains uncertain. In light of how far we've come in tightening policy, the uncertain lags with which monetary policy affects the economy, and potential headwinds from credit tightening, the committee decided at today's meeting to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 5 to 5.25%, and to continue the process of significantly reducing our securities holdings. As I noted earlier, nearly all committee participants expect that it will be appropriate to raise interest rates somewhat further by the end of the year. But at this meeting, considering how far and how fast we've moved, we judged it prudent to hold the target range steady to allow the committee to assess additional information and its implications for monetary policy. In determining the extent of additional policy firming that may be appropriate to return inflation to 2% over time, the committee will take into account the cumulative tightening of monetary policy, the lags with which monetary policy affects economic activity and inflation, and economic and financial developments. In our SEP, participants wrote down their individual assessments of an appropriate path for the federal funds rate based on what each participant judges to be the most likely scenario going forward. If the economy evolves as projected, the median participant projects that the appropriate level of the federal funds rate will be 5.6% at the end of this year, 4.6% at the end of 2024, and 3.4% at the end of 2025. For the end of this year, the median projection is a 0.5 percentage point higher than in our March projections. I hasten to add, as always, that these projections are not a committee decision or plan. If the economy does not evolve as projected, the path for policy will adjust as appropriate to foster our maximum employment and price stability goals. We will continue to make our decisions meeting by meeting based on the totality of incoming data and their implications for the outlook for economic activity and inflation, as well as the balance of risks. We remain committed to bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal and to keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Reducing inflation is likely to require a period of below-trend growth and some softening of labor market conditions. Restoring price stability is essential to set the stage for achieving maximum employment and stable prices over the longer run. To conclude, we understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do at the Fed is in service to our public mission. We will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Colby. Thank you. Colby Smith with the Financial Times. I'm curious what gives you and the committee the confidence that waiting will not be counterproductive at a time when the monthly pace of core inflation is still so elevated. Interest rate sensitive sectors like housing, while they've felt the drag of the past Fed actions, have started to recover in some regions, and financial conditions, most recently were easing.
So, I guess I would go back to the beginning of this tightening cycle to address that. So as we started our rate hikes early last year, we said there were 3 issues that would need to be addressed kind of in sequence. And that of the speed of tightening, the level to which rates would need to go, and then the period of time over which we'd need to keep policy restrictive. So at the outset, going back 15 months, the key issue was how fast to move rates up, and we moved very quickly by historical standards. Then last December, after 4 consecutive 75 basis point hikes, we moderated to a pace of a 50 basis point hike, and then this year to 3 25 basis point hikes at sequential meetings. So it seemed to us to make obvious sense to moderate our rate hikes as we got closer to our destination. So the decision to consider not hiking at every meeting and ultimately to hold rates steady at this meeting, I would just say it's a continuation of that process. The main issue that we're focused on now is determining the extent of additional policy firming that may be appropriate to return inflation to 2% over time. So the pace of the increases and the ultimate level of increases are separate variables. Given how far we have come, it may make sense for rates to move higher, but at a more moderate pace. I want to stress one more thing, and that is that the committee decision made today was only about this meeting. We didn't make any decision about going forward, including what would happen at the next meeting, including we did not decide or really discuss anything about going to an every other meeting kind of an approach or really any other approach. We really were focused on what to do at this meeting.
So there was no kind of initial debate about the possibility of July, any sense of the initial support at this stage for that move?
So again, we didn't make a decision about July. I mean, of course, it came up in the meeting from time to time, but really the focus was on what to do today. I would say about July 2 things. 1, decision hasn't been made. 2, I do expect that it will be a live meeting.
Thanks, Howard Schneider with Reuters. I was just wondering if you could help us understand the narrative here, because it feels like there's been a level shift in the dots. Stronger GDP, less of a hit to unemployment, slower progress on inflation, and I'm wondering, in this sort of, where's the disinflation coming from?
Sure.
The labor market's going to be stronger, it looks like. It's not coming from there. Demand's not coming down all that fast, according to GDP. You've doubled your estimate of GDP. So what's the narrative here? It seems like it's getting more immaculate rather than more messy.
So you're right that the data came in, I would say, consistent with, but on the high side of expectations. So, and if you go back to the former SEP, the last SEP in March, you will see that growth moved up. These are not huge moves, but growth estimates moved up a bit. Unemployment estimates moved down a bit. Inflation estimates moved up a bit. And, all 3 of those kind of point in the same direction, which is, that perhaps more restraint will be necessary than we had thought at the last meeting. So although The level, frankly, is pretty, the level of 5.6 is pretty consistent if you think about it, where the federal funds rate was trading before the bank incidents of early March. So we've kind of gone back to that. So your question is, where's the disinflation going to come from? And I don't think the story has really changed. The committee has consistently said and believed that the process of getting inflation down is going to be a gradual one. It's going to take some time. And I think you go back to the three-part framework for core PCE inflation, which is, we think, as good an indicator as you can have for where inflation is going forward. You start with goods. With goods, we need to see continued healing in supply conditions, supply-side conditions. They've definitely improved a substantial amount, but if you talk to people in business, they will say it's not back to where it was. So that's one thing, and that should enable goods prices to continue, goods inflation to continue to come down over time. In terms of housing services inflation, that's another big piece, and you are seeing there that new rents, new leases are coming in at low levels, and it's really a matter of time as that goes through the pipeline. In fact, I think any forecast that people are making right now about inflation coming down this year will contain a big dose of this year and next year, will contain a good amount of disinflation from that source, and that's, again, probably going to come slower than we would expect. That leaves, the big sector, which is a little more than half, pardon me, of core PCE inflation. That's non-housing services, and we see only the earliest signs of disinflation there. It's a sector, it's a very broad and diverse sector. I would say in a number of the parts of that sector, the largest cost would be wage costs. It's the service sector, so it's heavily labor intensive, and I think many analysts would say that the key to getting inflation down there is to have a continuing loosening in labor market conditions, which we have seen. We have actually seen, I go through a number of indicators suggesting there's been some loosening in labor market conditions. We need to see that continue. I would almost say that the conditions that we need to see in place to get inflation down are coming into place, and that would be growth meaningfully below trend. It would be a labor market that's loosening. It would be goods pipelines getting healthier and healthier and that kind of thing. The things are in place that we need to see, but the process of that actually working on inflation is going to take some time.
Nick.
Nick Tamaros of the Wall Street Journal. Chair Powell, what's the value in pausing and signaling future hikes versus just hiking now? I mean, not to be flippant, but I don't lose weight just by buying a gym membership. I have to actually go to the gym. 16 of your colleagues put down a higher year-end 23 rate today. A majority of you think you're going to have to go up by 50 basis points this year. So why not just rip off the Band-Aid and raise rates today? So
first I would say that the question of speed is a separate question from the question from that of level. Okay, so and I think if you look at the SEP, that is our estimate, our individual. It's really accumulation of our individual estimates of how far to go. I mentioned how we got to those numbers. In terms of speed, it's what I said at the beginning, which is speed was very important last year. As we get closer and closer to the destination, and according to the SEP, we're not so far away from the destination in most people's accounting. It's reasonable, it's common sense to go a little slower, just as it was reasonable to go from 75 basis points to 50 to 25 at every meeting. And so the committee thought overall that it was appropriate to moderate the pace, if only slightly. And there are benefits to that. So that gives us more information to make decisions. We may try to make better decisions. I think it allows the economy a little more time to adapt as we make our decisions going forward, and we'll get to see. We don't know the full extent of the consequences of the banking turmoil that we've seen. It would be early to see those, but we don't know what the extent is. We'll have some more time to see that unfold. I mean, it's just the idea that we're trying to get this right, and this is if you think of the two things as separate variables, then I think that the skip, I shouldn't call it a skip, the decision makes sense.
I know you said July is live with only one June employment, with only the June employment and the CPI report for June due to be released before the July meeting. You get the ECI after, you get the senior loan officer survey after, you get some bank earnings at the end of next month. What incremental information will the committee be using to inform their judgment on whether this is in fact a skip or a longer pause?
Well, I think you're adding that to the data that we've seen since the last meeting, too. Since we chose to maintain rates at this meeting, it'll really be a 3-month period of data that we can look at. And I think that's a full quarter, and I think you can draw more conclusions from that than you come from any 6-week period. We'll look at those things. We'll also look at the evolving risk picture. We'll look at what's happening in the financial sector. We'll look at all the data, the evolving outlook, and we'll make a decision.
Gina. Thanks for taking our questions. Gina Smilek, New York Times. You obviously, in your forecast, marked up the sort of path for growth, marked down the path for unemployment, and marked up the path for inflation.
Gina, we missed you.
I wonder,
we missed
since
you,
March,
Gina.
what
Woo!
has changed to make you think that the economy is a lot more resilient and inflation is going to be a lot more stubborn? And given that, why do you feel confident that this is as high as you're going to have to revise the federal funds rate, or do you think it's possible we could have even a higher than 5.6% terminal by the end of this cycle?
I mean, on the first part, I just think we're following the data and also the outlook. The economy the labor market, I think, has surprised many, if not all, analysts over the last couple of years with its extraordinary resilience, really. It's just remarkable, and that's really, if you think about it, that's what's driving. It's job creation, it's wages moving up, it's supporting spending, which in turn is supporting hiring, and it's really the engine, it seems, that is driving the economy. So it's really the data. In terms of, we always write down at these meetings what we think the appropriate terminal rate will be at the end of this year. That's how we do it. It's based on our own individual assessments of what the most likely path of the economy is. It can actually, in reality, wind up being lower or higher. And there's really no way to know. But it's what people think as of today, and as the data come in.
Okay. All right. I think we got the idea here. Okay, we got the idea. I've been taking some notes. Terrafin says, give this man a wrench. Dude's not getting a wrench. He got to follow the process just like everybody else. We don't just give out wrenches here like candy. We're not the Federal Reserve of influencer wrenches. It's not what we do here. I'm not doing it. All right. So y'all got to figure that out. Okay. So I took some notes. Let's talk about a couple things. Let's see what's happening. Give you an idea of, I think, where they're at right now. So the first thing that I want to point out here, for some of you who are new and might not understand how this works, we went through, well, first and foremost, I'll just say that the whole system is completely and utterly flawed. The fact that we find ourselves in this situation, maybe every like 5 years to 10 years, major events every 10 years, used to be major events every 20 years, and that's just shrinking and decreasing because we're running out of rope here. But I'm going to tell you this, the Federal Reserve contributes to inflation by increasing the amount of money, okay, that's circulating. Now, Rags, why does that cause inflation? All right. Well, to even describe why that causes inflation, you have to understand just basic principles of macroeconomics. Okay. So let me think of a good way to put this. All right. So let's say that there's a grocery store. Okay. You got a grocery store in a town of 5,000 people. And, typically speaking, the amount of wages that those people have, that's in balance with the amount of goods and supplies that store has in that small town. So you don't see much of a mismatch ever. The shelves are always stocked. Things are always good to go. Taking care of 5,000 people in that town, and there's goods that support 5,000 people. So what happens here? What happens when suddenly the government comes in and all those 5,000 people, they get maybe a 20% or 30% bump in their salaries that year? Okay, what happens? Well, now all of those people have more money. Okay, so they have more money. Now you're going to start to see an imbalance. Why? Because people like to spend money. So they're going to go to that store that was maybe the average medium income in that part of the country was 35,000 or 40,000 a year, and maybe suddenly it goes up to 50 to 55,000 a year because the government was giving handouts. Well, you've got more dollars chasing the same amount of goods, which means those goods go away quicker. People spend more money, right? So what happens? Well, there's market processes here that we need to consider. One thing that we need to consider is how are those shelves going to get stocked, okay? Well, what if we keep following the supply chain back? We follow it all the way back to the farm for the vegetables, or all the way back to the manufacturing plant for some of the textiles and the goods. Well, what happens is there is a massive demand. So when there's a massive demand and there's not enough supply, it causes prices to go up. Okay, so that's the issue. Where did this all start? It all started with the government that was giving out money to the people that they did not exchange for one unit or one piece of value of labor. That's where all this started. So you have the Federal Reserve that gives out money. They stimulate the economy, but those dollars are chasing the same amount of goods. The amount of goods and products and services don't go up. So the Federal Reserve can contribute to inflation by increasing the supply of money and the supply of credit in the economy. And when the Fed lowers interest rates, it makes borrowing cheaper and encourages consumers and businesses to take out loans. Now, here's the thing. When we say interest rates, I don't want to jump the gun on that either, because we want to build your knowledge. So what the Federal Reserve does, it has the power to set interest rates between the major big banks. And subsequently, it does the same thing for the regional banks and then the smaller banks. Now, here's what I mean by that. The federal funds rate is the interest rate that the Federal Reserve charges or causes other banks to lend and borrow amongst each other, right? So what happens here is if Bank A needs a loan from Bank B, and these are major banks, maybe in good times, the federal funds rate might be 3%. So the Federal Reserve sets that number. Now, what happens when the Federal Reserve wants to slow down economic activity? Well, they're going to say, well, now the federal funds rate, and they start increasing. Now it's 5%. So if the Federal Reserve is telling all these major banks that you have to lend and you got to borrow money at 5% interest rate, where it was 3% before, which is, almost 100% difference, what's that going to do to the banks underneath? Well, all of those products that the banks underneath, all the products that they offer the public that's based on the interest rate they're getting from the bigger bank, they've got to increase their rates too, because the big banks have rate increases, profit margins are cut into. They've got to raise their prices for money. They got to raise their prices for credit. So when they say interest rate increases, they're basically saying that it costs more money to make money or to buy goods and services. A perfect example of this would be home mortgages, right? So the home mortgage rate has increased significantly since the bottom of COVID, for example. Okay, so they increased interest rates. It means the regional banks had to increase interest rates on their customers, which means the smaller banks had to increase interest rates on their customers. That has a dampening effect on the economy. So also what the Fed can do, it can engage in open market operations. And in that case, it can buy government securities. It can inject money into the economy. It can pull money out. Now, one of the things that you heard him say, and I made a note of this as well. Let me make sure I get this right. Yeah. Essentially, they are continuing to purchase, or they're continuing to dump the balance sheet. So what they're doing is taking some of the securities that they purchased, the government securities that they purchased, and they're selling them off. So when you're increasing the supply in the market, things are going to decrease. Demand will hopefully decrease. He said the full effects of our tightening have yet to be felt. This is important to note too. And I don't know if some of you guys noticed this, but at the very end, he also says, he used the term skip. All right. Now, he didn't mean to use that. He says, I shouldn't use that he corrected himself. But what they're talking about in the past, what you see a rate hike pause. And then, so basically, well, an increase, a pause, and then another increase. That's a skip. It's skipping one increase. So that's what he was referring to. And he led on on many different occasions during this conference that there would be further increases this year. The federal funds rate's at about 5%. They said the average federal funds rate at the end of 2023 is going to be about 5.6%. So about 5.5, 5.6. What's that mean? That means by the end of this year, we're going to have at least 2 to possibly 3 more rate hikes. That's what that means. Okay. So this was why I wanted everybody to be very, very careful about getting super, super optimistic about things. They've done a lot of damage to the economy. They're pausing right now to see if this damage is going to have the effect that they want. Okay. They're trying to get inflation under control. They're trying to get it down to 2%. If you looked at some of the charts that they were sharing, they don't expect inflation to be in the 2% range. Like they said 2.1% by the middle to end of 2025. Okay. So there's a long way to go, man. This is a big bus. Inflation is trying to slam the brakes on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the ocean. It takes many, many nautical miles to make that happen, to do a full stop, because there's so much mass. There's so much economic energy and mass in the economy now that you're seeing these same effects here. They're continuing to do quantitative tightening. Initially, they were taking out $45 billion per month. Now they're taking out on average about $90 billion per month. They plan on doing that for 24 months. Okay. So in the big picture, why is taking out money? Again, guys, if you have more dollars chasing less goods, it's going to cause the price of goods to go up because more people are going to buy those goods. And then there's going to be a supply shock. There's going to be demand for these things and price goes up. So they're pulling money out of the economy. They're pulling money out of the economy so you don't have more dollars chasing the same amount of goods. Now we've done this math. I think 90 billion over 24 months is 2.1 trillion, which is the exact same amount that they stimulated the economy with, wouldn't you know it, during COVID. So they're pulling all that money back out. And you guys thought you were getting a good deal here. You're not really getting a good deal. Trust me. You're getting smacked in the face right now. That's for sure. They say that labor demand substantially exceeds the supply of workers still. Okay, guys, this is important to know. There's a couple ways to get out of inflation. The first way to get out of inflation is to artificially manipulate the market in order to get out of inflation, right? So they decrease interest rates. They rug the economy to slow inflation. That's one of the ways they do it. And we think that that's probably the worst way. Okay. What's a good way? And I'm surprised that this has not been some sort of a talking point by the Federal Reserve, or really, I'm correct me if I'm wrong or send me a link. I've not heard anybody talk about this. The other way is to produce your way out of inflation. Well, what does that mean? Okay. Well, let's go back to what we learned. So if the government gives people a bunch of money, right, and there's only a finite amount of the supply, one way that you can do it is take money away from the people and hurt the people. But what's the other way to do it? The other way to do it is increase the amount of goods. So the amount of goods is equal with the amount of dollars that are chasing those amount of goods. So there's another way to do this. We increase production. So you have companies that can come in and invest, and they can increase that supply to match that demand. I think we're kind of seeing that, folks. I really do think we're kind of seeing that. Now, why? It's because, this is for what's happening to the economy right now, it's pretty interesting that the labor market is really so strong. Like he said, labor demand substantially exceeds the supply of workers. There are companies out there that need workers and they just can't hire them fast enough. Now, there could be other reasons for that. It could be because Americans, for example, are a bunch of lazy asses, some of us. And they're just not out working because the government's subsidizing everything. That's one way to look at it. Rags, you're so horrible. You hate poor people, Rags. You hate them. No, I don't hate poor people. I'm the mayor of Realville, population 1. That's why. All right. Significant reducing of securities holdings. That's what he said. Those were his exact words. Okay. Now, like I said, 5.6% at the end of this year for the federal funds rate. Ladies and gentlemen, we can expect at least 2 more rate hikes, 2 to 3 more rate hikes, right? Which is in absolute in line with what we've been saying here. We said 2023, we're going to see probably the final capitulation event of these markets. And if they pause rate hikes next month, you're probably going to see some sort of an increase in the market, maybe. But then after that, it's going to be a fake out, and we're going to have those final capitulation events in many different markets. Not only that, most of the major banks are calling for some sort of recession. Now, the question is whether or not you want to believe what they say, because they're going to just feed the public with whatever they want. They're going to trade against the information that they give to the public. It's the stock markets and really the economy in general is stacked against the common man. If you're not in the know, you ain't in the know. All right, let me see what other points I had here to make sure I wasn't missing anything. Tighter credit conditions moving forward this year. There are some headwinds from credit tightening. This is another thing, all right? So a lot of these smaller banks, regional and smaller banks, they've got to make the decision whether or not they want to. So you put an application in for some sort of credit. Maybe it's a credit card. Maybe it's a personal loan. Maybe it's a used vehicle loan, new vehicle loan. That's credit, right? So these smaller banks, they have to take a look at this and they say, well, what's my risk to reward ratio here? Okay, am I taking on more risk than I need to? And these regional and smaller banks, they're going to make decisions to tighten credit standards. Am I going to lend to this person? Would I lend to him now? Probably not. Would I lend to him? Would have lent to him probably 24 months ago? Sure. It was a different economy, different type of situation here. We have the ability to absorb maybe more risk based on the economy of 24 months ago or longer rather than now. So one of the things they're going to be looking at is these reports that come out from these regional banks and smaller banks to take a look and see if, how many people are being lent to, okay? What are the effects of these interest rate hikes on the bigger banks? How are those trickling down to the smaller banks, and how those smaller banks are making decisions for credit worthiness right now? Okay. Yep, got that. Okay, this is another important thing. Okay, so one of the reasons that I've read that people are calling for a recession in the back half of this year is that during COVID, there was a massive amount of backlog in terms of orders, right? Why? All this money got pumped into the economy. All these people started ordering stuff. And there weren't enough people, there weren't enough goods, and weren't enough good services to basically fulfill all of those orders. So there has been a multi-year backlog on a lot of these items from a global standpoint. Okay, we're talking globally here. So what's the fear? The fear is that those orders finally get cleared out here in the next 3 to 6 months. Okay? When those orders get cleared out, that's when employers start cutting people's jobs because there's just no demand anymore. They're not manufacturing or making things, goods and services. So they're going to start firing people. So that's something to look out for too. Jerome Powell didn't mention that, but that is a reality, and that is actually it's a fact that we need to monitor and take a look at here. One of the questions was, why not just rip off the Band-Aid? So what do they mean by that? Well, he said if you guys are going to go up to 5.5% for the federal funds rate, the lending rate, why not just go ahead and increase rates this month and then have an increase in rates one more month? And he said, listen, he says, when there was the crisis, when inflation was going sky high, we had to hop in real quick and we had to be extremely aggressive with our rate hikes in order to tame inflation. Now, guys, mind you, everything that I'm talking about, I'm just talking about through the eyes of Jerome Powell, what he's looking at. I don't agree with any of this. You guys know I don't agree with it. But I'm just kind of deciphering and let you know what's going through their heads here. So he said, listen, we had to act quickly, we had to act aggressively, and we had to act violently, so to speak, when inflation was just skyrocketing. And that's what we did. We saw the 75 basis point rate hikes, the 50 basis point rate hikes, multiple months in a row. He says, but now that the trajectory is going in the right direction, he's basically saying there's no need to further damage and harm the economy by getting too aggressive. We can slow this thing down a little bit to make this as soft as possible for regular Americans. And I think he's primarily worried about jobs, because if they pull too fast, if credit standards are too difficult for people to get any sort of loans or credits or businesses, this or that, it could really hurt the economy. So I think that was the point that he was making there. Okay. Got that. Cool. I'm going to check the markets here. Let's check and see what's happening. And I want to go ahead and check the sentiment too on Twitter. I'll actually do that. FOMC. Let's see what they got to say here. Breaking: Fed's pause interest rate hikes 5 to 5.25%. Yeah, we know that already. Not a beginner's market. Hope everybody's safe. People are saying the FOMC news is somewhat bullish. Guys, you got to be careful here, man. You got to be careful. But here's the thing. The whole world knew that there was going to be a pause. So that pause was already priced in for a while, I think, in my humble opinion. I'm going to check the dollar here real quick. Nothing to write home about. S&P 500. So we had a nice little pump here. Okay, now let's check. I'm going to take the, well, we had a little doji that may indicate some sort of topping here. I don't know. Bottom line in here is, folks, like, if you're thinking in terms of 3 months or 6 months, you're out of line. The macroeconomic picture is not really going to be getting much better, I'd say, until 2024. That affords many of us the opportunity, whether you're involved with stocks or whether you're involved with crypto, to be able to take advantage of what's happening here. Okay? So I would say that's some big knowledge here for you. I've said on my Twitter many times, folks, that it's going to get weird towards the end of this year. And there's going to be people that disappear off the face of the map. The sad thing here is that this is the worst time to actually be disappearing. And it's because there's the most blood in the streets right now. It's probably the most overquoted and the most overutilized notion about investing. But guys, I mean, this is bloody. It's weird out there. So if you just hang around, if you stick around, if you stick to your plan over the next 12 months, just say, listen, I'll give it 18 more months, Rags. 18 more months. Crypto doesn't turn around, then I'm done forever. Fine. Just give it 18 more months. That's nothing. That's nothing. It's a drop in the bucket, man. Okay. Let's check chat here. Actually, I'm going to go to, I do want to actually go to Dex Screener. Okay. We'll go to deck screener real quick. We're going to go to multi-charts. Okay. All right, we'll take a look at Texan here. Guys, just so everybody knows, I'm a co-founder of Texan Token. Everything I'm about to say, just realize that I'm co-founder. Anything I do say, make sure you double check, triple check, and I can't really do much technical analysis. I will say that, according to this chart, last night there was it seems this is on the daily, the bottom of yesterday, we're up about 43%. It's at one point last night, it pumped up about 100%. Pretty cool, pretty nice to be able to do that. Volume's increasing. I think that there's more eyes on this. The biggest thing that I want you to take away from Texan is that this is not a meme coin. This is not going away. This is a long-term project, and Crypto Heartbeat and I are here to stay for the long term. So very excited to see the community continuing to grow, and really, if you take care of the community, everything else takes care of itself. If you take care of your community, everything else takes care of itself. If you want to join this awesome community and find out a whole lot about what we do and how we operate, I'd encourage you to come to t.me/Texan Token. Okay, so that's our Telegram group. Got the best admins in the business by far. If there was an objective way to measure that, we would win. All right, Rat Pulse here. All right, guys, this is kind of, again, one of the things about Texan Token is our chart looks very similar to Pulse and PulseX. That's because our liquidity is primarily bonded with Pulse. So it's going to rise and fall with Pulse. The question here becomes, folks, how much of a fall off are we going to have? I told you guys last month that when you start getting to the 60 to 90% range, that's a really good indicator. Those are really, really good buy periods, especially for brand new projects. Okay, we are definitely in that window at this point. Right now, the correction from all-time high is about 72%. One thing that you got to understand too, let me do this math real quick for you guys. I forgot. I keep forgetting this number. I hate it. 25,000. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4. The top multiplier person, it's 4 zeros and a 4. Am I correct in saying that? Let me check here. Yeah. Okay. This is going to give you an idea, folks. The top wallets based on multipliers and based on the SAC rate, they can be selling all the way down to about 4 zeros and a 4. And they could still be in some sort of profit. Now, if we measure the top down to this level, that's about 86% off of the local high. So just expect that, folks. Just expect that, and just understand that if you're sticking to your plan, having a good understanding of what's happening on a bigger picture is going to help you understand what's going to happen here in crypto. And you're just buying more time, man. It's great. It's pretty cool. Okay. It's pretty good stuff. All right. And then the same thing is going to go for PulseX. Now, the interesting thing about PulseX, again, all these charts look very similar. In terms of sacrifice rate, PulseX has only been above sacrifice rate for a short amount of time. Sacrifice rates, we'll just say right about here. Okay. Now, we said 4 zeros and a 4. We say 4 zeros and a 4? No, we didn't say 4 zeros and a 4. We said 4 zeros and a 1. Yeah. 4 zeros and a 4. Sorry. So here's the deal, folks. With PulseX right now, this is something very important to look at. PulseX currently, let me measure this run down here. PulseX is at the point where a lot of these whales are going to start selling at a loss. Now, what I told you guys before we even launched, this is not financial opinion, this is financial advice. I made the point that, hey, we're going to take a look at Pulse Chain, take a look at PulseX. Which one's going to be cheaper relative to sacrifice price of 1 to 10,000? Which one's going to be cheaper? And guys, the entire time, PulseX has been cheaper. The entire time, PulseX has been cheaper. So I don't know what you want to do with that information. But when things turn around and liquidity's bonded and the bull market comes back into swing and there's massive amounts of volume on top of all the other updates that are inevitably going to happen with PulseX, you know, do what you got to do. There's something there, though. There could be something there. All right. All right, let's take a look at Hex. So this is going to be Hex on Pulse Chain. So, you know, I'm reluctant to measure from that top wick. Hex did pop up to about 4 cents from that top wick just to keep consistency, because that's what we were doing with the other ones. We're about 75% sell-off right now. The chart seems to be flattening out just a little bit. Now, the interesting thing, I think on the Ethereum side, it's at a point, what, 0.007? So it's about 30% underneath. About 30% underneath. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Texan probably is running about the same thing, about between 30 and 50% on any given day in terms of the difference between the Ethereum side and the Pulse Chain side. So again, guys, this is massive buying opportunity if you're in the market for these assets. All of crypto is on sale. I told you guys for 2 years straight, I told you my story about just waiting till things got on fire sale in, 2019, for example, 2018, 2019. You wait till things are on fire sale and you load up. And then instead of you being exit liquidity for other people are exit liquidity for you when you wisely and smartly remove yourself from the markets in the future. All right. So, we are 57 minutes in. Somehow it always happens like that. It's always perfect. Guys, I'll just say this again. Just want to reassure you. Just stay relaxed. Stay chill. DeFi, cryptocurrency is under attack, but DeFi isn't under the radar yet. Okay, it's not on the radar, rather, yet. So until that happens, until these court battles get fought, and those are going to take years and years and years, I think, guys, time is on our side at this point, because we are certainly well past halfway in terms of this bear market being over, in my opinion. 2024 is going to be special for us. You've got the Bitcoin halving. When you have a healthy Bitcoin, the whole market gets turned up. We know that that's going to happen at some point in probably 2024. We start edging up slowly. And then 2025, you saw the charts that they shared today on the Fed video. Most everybody in the FOMC, I think the average was what, 2.1% by 2025 in terms of inflation. And that's good. If we have a strong trajectory, we're going to get there. All right. Let's check. Rags, how does facing reality not have a wrench? +1 in the chat if Brandon needs to give reality a wrench. You don't want to do that. You're not going to, nope. Don't bully me. Don't bully me in my own chat. He knows what to do. He knows people who has one, and he can figure out himself. For everybody in here crying about a wrench. You ain't getting a wrench unless you go through the process. Corporations are not your friends. People working hard. Corporate greed is the issue. There's a lot of greed, guys. RH ecosystem knocking on the basement door again. Are we really talking about globally? We really talking globally here? Sam I Am says. Yeah, we're talking globally. If you can't find people to work for you, you aren't paying enough. Ooh, maybe. It depends on what job. Depends on what job, man. Right? I mean, in some instances that works, but not all instances. I wish they would stop blaming wages when they're buying back stocks at a record pace. It's not the workers' fault that inflation is up. It's price gouging and stock buybacks. It's not the workers' fault. Price gouging, maybe. Stock buybacks, potentially. I think they probably all add into it. But at the core of our entire economic system is a lack of a free market. I think that's the big issue here. And they don't want a free market because a free market would mean they would have to compete. And there is an established elite club that does not want to give up on inflation. Inflation makes people very, very rich at the top on the backs of everybody else here in chat, unfortunately. All right. Shane Phillips, this is why I love the Texan token. 22, free us. Give us financial freedom. You know, I was thinking about this yesterday. I was thinking about this, guys. Texan token contract, just a contract. That's all it is. It's nothing. Just a contract. The only thing that makes this important or popular or worthwhile is whether or not you guys decide to band together, talk about it, and then, basically say, you know what? We're accepting this. This is our thing. You're going to throw it on your back and you're going to make it work. Crypto Heartbeat can't do anything about that. I can't do anything about that. We're just one person together, two people. You guys have to go out and talk about this. You guys decide. I will say this. I'm very encouraged. Even in the past 2 weeks, there's been a shift. There's been a shift in the mentality of the people that are in our community. And I'm seeing that people understand this on a bigger level. I am thankful for the bear market. I'm thankful for the bear market because it's going to teach so many people the lessons that they need to learn. The markets teach you the lessons that you need to learn. And you guys are going to have such an advantage moving forward into crypto right now, being in where you are right now. Hexius, man of the world, Rags, you're spot on. Thank you, brother. That's a good dude right there. Hexius, man of the world, is a good dude. 99% of all businesses rely on credit to pay their employees. If they cannot borrow, they'll start laying off workers. You're right. Tightening credit conditions hurts. TexanShop.com, Shane Phillips says. Texan merch. Yeah, PPP loans. What a grift. Yep, guys. They will find a way to enslave you in any situation that they can take advantage of. You're right. All right, let's go down here. Sam Io says, we're not bullying you. We're asking you to hold up your end of the deal. What's my end of the deal, Sam? I was listening and not reading. I thought someone was about to buy someone else a ranch. Davis says, just unsubscribe for lack of transparency. SEC's killing off our competition and we're good. Not if, but when. People think so short term. You got what has happened the last 10 to 15 years here, folks? It's not going to go away. This is a swell. The amount of momentum that has been accrued over this past decade. Guys, we are on a completely different trajectory to the upside. Cryptocurrency is. All this other stuff, really, in my mind, is just fluff. It's not going away. It is not going away. I do find solace in the fact that Gensler's out in about 3 years, 2-3 years. Hopefully, he's replaced by somebody who's reasonable. Hopefully. Now, I say hopefully, and that's a strong hopefully, because I got no faith in anything anymore. Except for my stuff. Shane Phillips says, I'm here to help. I bought 1 billion last night. Shane Phillips. Cheers, man. Win Christmas video. Davis. Yeah. So we raised about, I think it ended up being about $4,200, I think, for the boxing club. So took me about a month or two to be able to get that money out to them. but the one of the coaches, his name's Everett. I met with him about a month and a half ago, and there were some reasons why we couldn't film, but they do have a fighter there. I'll let you guys know about this. They've got a fighter, and he is he got out of jail. He did something stupid when he was young. He got out of jail. He's trying to do the right thing. He's got a wife. He's got a kid. He's a really talented fighter, and he's going to be going to the Olympic trials, I believe. So we're going to try to get a camera in there and tell the story about that guy, because some of this money is going to be going to help him as well. So they do have the money. We passed that off a while back, and we're kind of working on that right now. Trying to make DeFi crypto illegal is like trying to make Benny babies illegal or baseball cards. It ain't going to happen. Bob Wells, what's up? PPP says, please pummel people. Papa. Hex Fetty. Yeah, the system's working as planned. All right, I'm trying to see. Okay. Sam, do you have any good rebuttal here? You didn't have any rebuttal. Facing Reality knows that I'm not playing. Looked at the sub list for sure. Okay. See, if you guys haven't got it yet, I end the stream when you guys start saying smart stuff. As long as you keep saying dumb stuff, I got stuff to talk about here. Does that make sense? She put the dang wrenches in Facing Reality's logo there. Okay, great update on the Christmas video. I will resubscribe once you wrench reality. We'll discuss this. But you know the rules. Sam knows the rules. Facing Reality, Sam's your sponsor. You're going to have to figure it out with her. Is there some Texan Hex meeting July 4th? I don't think it's on July 4th. But you could always make one. Depending on what your state. I mean, there's a lot of Texans in Texas. Imagine that. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls from all over the world, Hexy Quinn is late. It's disgusting. It's disturbing. She doesn't care. Davis says, read the rules. Wilfred Sanchez Jr. Hello, fam. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls from all over the world, my name is Rags to Riches. Quick reminder here.
Rags to Riches. Do not like, comment, or subscribe.
Have a horrible, horrible day. Bye-bye.